Hi, this is yet another weekly roundup of new maker products, but going back to the old time slot of Wednesday, I'll be interleaving it with my other midweek videos, so technically it's not a weekly roundup, but more of a weekly wide weekly roundup, wide weekly roundup, wonderful weekly, wizened, wacky. But anyway, on with the show. This video is being sponsored by JLC PCB. If you want some quick turnaround prototype PCBs, then I highly recommend them. They can churn out 2, 4, 6 or 8 layer PCBs and support BGAs and track widths down to 0.2mm. They're currently offering 10 PCBs for only $2. And if you're a first time customer, you'll get $20 off shipping off your first order. Nice. First up on Kickstarter, there's a campaign up for a Witty Repeater called the Cortex Extend. Witty repeaters are a dime a dozen, but this one comes in a pretty tiny package and has LiPo battery charging built in. Since it's an open source product, you'll not only be able to extend Wi-Fi signals, but do other funky things like sniffing traffic, network segmentation and shaping, and even act as a de-author. If you want to get into high voltages, then here's a simple campaign for a boost converter giving you 900 volts from a 5 volt DC supply. It's not just a DC boost converter, as it has an OLED display and Atmega 328p on board, allowing you to control output voltages over UART. If you're into OpenHab, Geiger counters and, I guess high voltages, then this looks pretty interesting. The Pixie Pico is another let's get everything as small as possible PCB. This one contains the ineffable Atmega 328pb in a tiny 20 by 20mm package. It breaks out 25 of the 27 available GPIOs on the 328pb, which is 4 more than the Arduino Nano. They also have the Pixie Nano, which is the same form factor as the Arduino Nano, but with more GPIO options. This is pretty cool. Formation is a 3D zerotrope, which is a fancy way of saying it simulates stop frame animation in real life. You add objects in various poses onto a disc that spins, and a flashing light overhead will strobe on and off, simulating movement of whatever is on the disc. There's also an iPhone app for it. Okay, it's pretty expensive, but cool nonetheless. Nothing happening on Indiegogo, but Crowd Supply has a few things. Stereo Pi is a PCB that provides a stereoscopic camera setup for vision analysis. It isn't just a Pi hat, but a PCB that allows the use of Pi compute modules. The board has, of course, 2 MIPI CSI connectors, SD card, 2 USB ports, Ethernet, HDMI out, and also breaks out a standard Pi header. There's already some fairly complete examples on display, so it looks like it's beyond the prototype stage. Back in Weekly Roundup number 55, we saw the AI Core X on Kickstarter. Well, now the up guys are back, this time on Crowd Supply with the AI Core X. These are some pretty beefy boards, all packaged into a tiny M2 key based PCB. You can literally slap these into anything that supports M2 and considerably beef up your machine learning and AI. Wireless based IoT devices are all fine and good, but you still need to power the little buggers. PoE is the logical answer to this, as it reduces the need for all those messy wall warts or having to work with ultra low power MCUs. Here's an ESP32 based board with inbuilt PoE, but unlike most industry PoE devices, this one aims to be fully compliant with the PoE standard. Lindinus V5 is a new SBC from Lindinus Pty Ltd. This board is touting the relatively new all-winner V5 sock, which only a couple of other SBCs are running. Not only does it come with the quad-core Cortex A7 sock running at 1.5 GHz, but 1 or 2 gig RAM, SD slot, eMMC socket, 4 USB 2.0 ports, gigabit Ethernet, optional Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, MIPI DSI, audio in and out, HDMI capable of 4K at 30 frames per second, but the little buggers are using a micro USB port for power. Shame really. You also have LiPo battery support, a standard Pi GPIO header, and also additional I2S and ADC headers. On the flip side is interesting. There's 2 MIPI CSI headers. The embedded vision engine supports facial recognition with a detection speed of 30 frames per second at 360p, but it does support video input at up to 4K. The computer vision engine allows for tracking of moving objects at 10 frames per second at 720p. They are supporting OpenCV and TensorFlow APIs. If you're into testing SBCs or developing for SBCs, then the Mux Pi looks pretty good. It's a PCB made from Tizen to allow full remote testing of an SBC. All you need is a Nano Pi Neo and you can physically power on and off the device, reflash the SD card, measure power consumption, and send fake EDID info over HDMI to support screens larger than you actually have. It's not an actual product, but rather a hacker release. You can pick up all the schematics, board layout, and other documentation from their wiki. FriendlyLEC are really a friendly bunch of people. They are starting to become fairly popular with the SBC hackers, so they are the better supported boards. They are now back with a new SBC called the Nano Pi M4. This board is yet another SBC joining the RK3399 ranks. It comes in a now standard Pi form factor, and as you can see, will allow it to fit into almost any Pi case. Not only does it have the hexa-core RK3399 running at 2 GHz, but comes in a 2 and 4 GB DDR3 RAM variant, along with 4 USB 3.0 ports, gigabit Ethernet, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 4K 60 frame per second capable HDMI, audio in-out, mic, MIPI CSI and DSI, eMMC, SD, and not only a standard Pi header, but an extra row of 24 header pins providing PCIe, PWM, USB, and a few more GPIOs thrown in. The really smart design is ditching the micro USB and using a USB Type-C instead. Nice move. I actually have one of these on my desk waiting to be reviewed, so stay tuned for that. The Lychee Tang is yet another PCB being added to the ever-growing list of cheap FPGA boards. This one contains the not-so-common ANLogic EG4S20BG256. What is it with these FPGA manufacturers and product names? Heck! This FPGA has 20,000 LUTs, 130 kilobyte SRAM and 64 megabit SDRAM. To get an idea of just how much grunt this has, it has just enough to be able to run the RISC-V core. The board has USB providing power and programming, 8 megabit flash, SD slot and expansion headers supporting RGB LCD, high-speed DAX and DVP camera. Over at Hackaday IO, there's a project up called the Blueberry Pi. This is a custom SBC running the Arduino V3, which is a low-end SoC running a Cortex-A7 at 1.2 GHz. This is something you'd find in home network routers and gateways. It has MIPI CSI and DSI, gigabit Ethernet, audio, Pi header, and supports driving LCD screens. Pretty neat little package that would have taken a while to design. The Enfuse is another option for getting into LoRaWAN. It's a LoRaWAN concentrator in an M2 key format, allowing you to set up a LoRaWAN gateway. It not only contains an SX130X LoRa transceiver, but an Stm32 handling most of the grunt work. Also has a surface mount UFL for external antenna. We've seen several acquisition boards in past weekly roundups. This one is a Pi Hat that's stackable. Each PCB can handle 8 channels at 12-bit resolution and 100 kilosamples per second. Not blazingly fast, but you can stack up to 8 of them, giving you 64 channels measuring from -10 to +10 volts. They also provide open source C, C++ and Python libraries. The Arduino guys are finally getting around to providing a proper Arduino CLI. It's only in alpha stage at the moment, but looks promising. You can do everything that you can do in the GUI, and I didn't really see anything that was missed out. You can pick up the alpha release from Arduino or build from scratch. Just a quick look through the source tree shows up that the entire CLI was written in Go. This is a promising sign. Maybe the start of moving away from Java, and maybe the GUI front end will eventually just call the CLI. The Stm32 Mcu Lineup has been pretty popular, and some of them are pretty grunty, offering more options than the Atmel lineup. The Stm32 F7 and H7 series were a pretty expensive but grunty MCU, being clocked at 216 and 400 MHz respectively. STMicro have now released a cheaper version of these MCUs with smaller flash to reduce cost. The Stm32F730 runs the same 216 MHz core, but has a crypto engine, USB and CAN bus. The Stm32F750 adds on an LCD controller, Ethernet and a bit more RAM. And the more grungy STM32H750 running at 400 MHz has a fairly fast ADC running at 3.5 megasamples per second and a hardware JPEG codec. Nice to see STMicro pushing the envelope again with some grunty MCUs. At the other end of the spectrum, and proving 8-bit ain't dead yet, Microchip have released their ATtiny3217 and ATtiny3216 MCUs. Both MCUs are almost identical with 32KB flash, 2KB RAM, the usual lineup of GPIOs, I2C, SPI and UARTs, but the 3217 has a 20-channel 10-bit ADC, while the 3216 has 16. It's a fairly tiny increment to the 8-bit lineup, but if you need more ADCs, you can get one of these. Do I need to point out all the DEF CON badge craze going on last month? If you want to get your fix, then Hackaday has not one, but 2 pages of drool-worthy badges on show. Over at my favourite maker store, Tindy, you can pick up the Lumens Compact. This is another PWM-based LED driver board that can directly connect onto a 12-volt SLA battery, driving LEDs at night and charging via solar by day. There's no visible MCU providing a UART or wireless connectivity, so control is via simple switches and pot. This is a pretty decent plated through hole kit for an audio sound meter. So it's a great project for someone wanting to get into electronics and have something useful at the end of it. And if you want a quick H-bridge driver allowing control of DC and stepper motors, then this one will drive up to 85 amps at 14 volts, but has a fairly flexible logic level input, allowing 3.3, 5 or even 12 volt logic levels. Haven't really seen any breakouts for an I2C isolator before. This one accepts 3.3 or 5 volt logic levels and can handle up to 100 kHz I2C bus speeds, but also provides full galvanic isolation, eliminating ground loops, noise and other weird things that can occur in electrical circuits. Now this is cool. It's essentially an effects pedal based on the V1000 IC. It runs an Atmega 328P, allowing UART based control over several effects on an audio input like chorus, echo and flanger. Nice. We've seen a number of ultra cheap logic analyzers from China based on this chip. Here's someone selling an open hardware version on Tindy. There's full support for SIGROC for this chip, so it's a pretty good option. So you probably have a bunch of bare ESP modules, and you're also probably getting annoyed with having to drop into programming mode all the time. The ESProg, or ESP-ROG, is a programmer for almost all the ESP series modules that has a similar auto-program circuit similar to Node MCU, which saves that annoying button pressing before programming each time. Nice. Over at Pimeroni, you can pick up one of their I2C based BH1745 luminescence and colour sensor breakouts. It can detect RGB colours and light levels fairly accurately and comes in a pretty small package. There's also an SM303D 6-DOF IMU breakout, which has accelerometer and magnometer, but lacks gyro. It's not one of the most uber IMUs around, but fairly good bang for your buck. Both of these modules can work by direct soldering, or they can be added to the breakout garden hat. Strange name, but good concept. This allows you to use either of those boards standalone or insert into these small edge connectors. It routes I2C, SPI and UART signals from those boards out to a handy header for use with a Pi or Arduino. Over at DF Robot, they have an injected molded case allowing you to add a Raspberry Pi and pretend that you're still in the 80s getting annoyed at elevator action. Similar to the one on Tindy, DF Robot are selling an I2C isolator as well. Does pretty much the same as the one on Tindy, but this one can handle only 5 volts. And if you're stuck for I2C addresses and you're seeing clashes, this I2C multiplexer will give you 8 independent I2C channels, So hook up the devices with the same addresses and you'll still be able to access them both. And finally, a USB Type-C breakout over at Pololo. I'll have to pick up a couple of these, I reckon. Something for the makers down under. There's this 5V buck boost regulator from Robot Gear that you can chuck into a breadboard easily. It's a little bit pricey, but hey, that's what you have to put up with living in the land down under. Over at Seed Studio, they have come out with a bunch of solid-state relay boards, giving you 1, 2, 4 and 8 outputs. Each of the boards also have an Stm32 loaded up, providing I2C based control via a Grove port, and those handy push connect terminals. Each SSR can switch a 240V 2A load, so pretty useful little things. This is probably the first time I've seen a major shopfront use SSRs. And they also have their Pi 3B plus PoE hat in. If you want to be able to power your Pi over PoE, then this is a good all-in-one solution. Even has a cooling fan on top. Nice. These little solar panels are fairly useful. They only deliver 10.5 milliamps at 7.2 volts, so not a heck of a lot of power, but just enough to charge up a small LiPo for some monitoring thingy you may have stuck somewhere and forgotten about. E-ink displays are still fairly expensive. I guess it's all supply and demand, but SparkFun have a 1.54 inch 3-color display. That's not too expensive. Has SD slot, is driven over SPI and supports 5V or 3.3V logic levels. Now the Pi Juice is pretty expensive, but if you really need some juice to power your Pi, it's a good option. Supports the standard BP7X LiPos with onboard Stm32 providing control, battery fuel gauge and RTC. Can accept input from solar, turbine driven by wind or even ferrets. Here's another option for getting into LoRaWAN. It's a single channel gateway based on the RFM95W LoRa module with a bunch of GPIOs broken out and CM340 based USB connectivity. If you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to hit like, and if you haven't already subscribed, then doing so will alert you to new videos I post. Well, as long as you hit that little bell icon thingy. And if you want to support me further, you can join the fabulous group of patrons I have over at Patreon or via PayPal. Some of them have been supporting me for the last 2 years, and I really wouldn't be still going without their support. So thanks for watching, and see you next week, or Sunday, whichever you want.